This is Dr. Alice. I want to take a little time today to talk about a Venn diagram that I commonly share with clients that I think can help you rethink reality and how you can get along with others. And I often use this in work to help clients reframe or reshape problems they're having in communication with others, to help them see that the reality that they think they're experiencing and the frustrations they're having with the other party might be based on their own perceptions about how the other person is thinking and feeling or acting or responding, which may not actually be true because they may be coming from a different perspective when they view it. So I'm sharing here on the screen my diagram. I decided to go ahead and draw it up. Normally I just kind of scribble it during sessions, but to help you out, I decided to make an actual, fixed image that is possibly shareable or whatever. Please give me feedback on if you like it or not. But here's my lovely Venn diagram. I titled it "Rethink Reality to Get Along Better with Others." So, basically life's not black and white. When you view reality, the circle that I label as A, I view as reality as a camera would see it. So if you're in a room with one or more other people, or on the street or in your car, wherever you may be, if you were being recorded, actual reality is what's happening according to what that camera can see or think in terms of the reality that's a common experience. You guys are physically seeing that actual reality together. But the circle that's labeled B, that's what you might personally be perceiving of that reality. And your perception of reality is based on your own past histories or experiences. And that might be very different from person C, would be a different person or people that are in the room or experiencing the same thing as you, based on their responses or their previous experiences, right? So this can affect a lot of different things. I mean, it can affect things from just everyday little interactions to more significant interactions or problems that we might experience in the workplace, let's say, with gender biases or racial biases, right? Because we come from our own background and our own biases, how we respond to things comes from that perspective. And when we look at how other people respond, if by default we're expecting them to respond the same way as we do, because we expect that they also might have that same background or that same experience, then we might have frustrations or problems with how they respond because we feel that they should have a different response than we do. And that can cause problems or frustrations, right? A simple, gender, cultural, racial kind of experience of that might be, how people might respond to jokes about race, in the workplace, right? So if you're part of the race that's being joked about, but you feel that as if in your reality you've experienced racial prejudice, you might have a very negative response to that kind of joke and not think it's funny at all. Whereas somebody else experiencing the same thing who does think it's funny because they don't have that same background, that experience, and they don't have necessarily perhaps the same sensitivity to it, they might just think it's funny, and they might even expound upon it to say something else that's more negative that you might consider to be inflammatory because of your own background. But they may not mean it from their perspective as being harmful, and they might need some correction in that, obviously, which is why we do a lot of education within the workplace for those kind of things. But they may not be intentionally doing it to cause you harm or to put you down personally. It's usually not personal from their perspective. They're usually just dense in many cases, unless you have a reason to suspect that they really are, out to get you. But generally, it's because of lack of understanding, lack of communication, lack of education in how these things act, and people just need some re-education. So as I kind of wrote out on this graph, right, the better we understand how other people that we might be interacting with might be perceiving reality different from us, either by just kind of thinking through how it might be, or working with a therapist or a counselor or a life coach on it, or talking with the individual, personally, if you can have that level of relationship, or if it's a workplace issue with an HR director, maybe. You can better understand where they're coming from, and understanding where they might be coming from and how it might be different from where you're coming from may help you, especially if you kind of think it out and even, draw circles like this, for example. It might help you to disassociate your emotional response and help you have a more logical, reasoned response to, hey, they responded this way, and why didn't I like that? Or what did I think that was going on in their head when that happened? And is what I'm thinking is going on in their head actually realistic or true, or might they actually be responding or thinking differently than that, right? And that can help you then give them more grace if they're responding or acting in ways we didn't expect, or it can also help us communicate with them better, and lead to being able to have more productive educational conversations. Because if you just respond to an emotionally tense situation negatively, as if they are deliberately being hurtful to you, it can also often put them on the defensive, especially if they don't know what they did wrong or didn't think that they'd done anything wrong. And that can cause a breakdown in communication rather than a healthy building of communication. So often it's better to, if you can, to just take a minute to walk away or think about what might be causing these feelings and thoughts and how well they are based in reality from this kind of perspective, and then be able to use that information to decide whether or not that person maybe needs some re-education, or if you should have a conversation with them to help them better understand what's going on. Another area in which my rethink reality, get along better with others graph is often used, or I often use it, is in helping people who are neurodiverse understand and relate to people who are neurotypical, right? So neurodiverse might be ADHD or autism or Asperger's, and neurotypical would just be someone who doesn't have a neurodiverse condition and might be considered normal. We can quibble about normal because I don't really like normal per se. I think everyone's a little bit odd. There's maybe not admitting how. But aside from that, people might normally think of themselves as normal or not neurotypical, not neurodiverse at least. If we consider that perspective, often people who are neurodiverse are frustrated because people don't understand them. But if those people who don't understand them are neurotypical, once again, the same problem occurs where the neurotypical people might be responding in one way because they are expecting a certain type of response from that neurodiverse individual. And meanwhile, that neurodiverse individual might feel beleaguered or frustrated or upset or misunderstood because they're just trying to be them and they're not meaning to upset the other person, but somehow whatever they do is always wrong. So one example of this that I've encountered in my work is someone who has Asperger's, for example, or autism. They may think and respond slower to the world around them than someone who's neurotypical might expect. They often actually have been found to have challenges with visual versus audio stimuli. So they may, for example, have someone say, "I love you." And they may, technically their body heard it, but their brain hasn't processed it, right? So for example, if this happened when someone was getting into a car and maybe two neurotypical people would think, oh, as person A is getting into in this case, person B, right? Reality is A. So person B is like getting into a car. Person C says, "I love you." And person C, who's neurotypical, is expecting person B to automatically respond, "I love you too," as they drive away. However, in reality, real reality, person B, technically their body has heard the "I love you," but their brain hasn't processed it yet. And by the time the car drives away, it may not have actually even quite registered that this is something that they should be verbally responding to. And by the time they've driven off down the road, they're like, oh, I should probably respond to that. But hey, it's too late now. I'm already gone, right? Whereas person C might be having said "I love you" and expecting person B to respond back as a neurotypical person would, instinctively, automatically, "I love you too." And they didn't get that "I love you too" that they were expecting. And so they might feel frustrated or unloved or hurt because they didn't get the typical response that they were expecting. And they might view it as person B being standoffish or being otherwise not emotionally engaged, right? Or holding back, or maybe they're thinking that, well, why didn't they say "I love you too"? Are they mad at me? What's going on, right? And person C is putting all this feeling and emotion into person B's behavior as if person B has a negative reason for why they didn't say "I love you," when in reality, person B just hadn't had enough time to process the "I love you," right? And this could be addressed from either party. So if I was working with person B, I would tell person B to be more aware of this as a condition that they deal with themselves, right? And that they could perhaps improve this kind of situation by, if those times occur when they realize that there was probably a response they were supposed to make in the moment, but they missed it, that they could still follow up later with a text, for example, to say, "Oh yeah, I heard you. Sorry, it took me a second. I love you too." But they should also explain this about themselves to person C so that person C understands. Similarly, but differently, if my client was person C, I would similarly explain the same problem with them and help person C to better understand that when they're dealing with somebody who's neurodiverse like person B, that they shouldn't be putting their own perceptions on how reality should be happening on person B, because person B is not doing it on purpose. It's literally how their brain is wired. They can't help it, for real. So they need to give them some grace about that, right? Trying to think that person B could just instinctively respond like another neurotypical person would to person C would be expecting that somebody who has a broken leg should be able to magically break dance just because you told them that they should, because they should be able to do so. They can't, right? It's a biological impossibility, right? So so that's another couple of examples from like the HRE, leadership kind of perspective, and then also from the neurodiverse perspective for how I think my Venn diagram about alternate realities can be helpful. And there's many other ways where just being able to think through this kind of thing can be helpful. If you're struggling with something yourself, I recommend just drawing those 3 circles out on a piece of paper and putting the actual facts of the situation that a third-party camera, right, that was recording the situation would record in A, and then what you perceive in B, and then trying to think through what person C perceives in C. And if you're not sure, that's where maybe you would want to talk to somebody else, even the person C, if you can, about what they're really experiencing. This could also be used, I'm sure, I would have to hope that family counselors use something like this, but not being a family counselor traditionally trained, let's say, I couldn't tell you for sure, but I'd love to know who else uses this or in what other capacities other therapists or counselors have used this kind of thing. Or if you've used this or do use this in the future, please let me know. I would love to hear from people who watch this video, ways in which this has helped them or some variant of this same concept has helped them or been applied. And we like comments and feedback. So when we get comments and feedback, we often randomly reach out to commenters to say thank you and send them little gifts. We have all kinds of fun little gizmos and gadgets here around the office that we like to give out. Unfortunately, I don't have one handy to share, but please keep following and subscribing and all that other fun stuff.